There were three major video game companies that I grew up with as a kid. Barring the Saturn and the Game Gear, I grew up with Sega. I played a lot of Sonic, Streets of Rage, and Crazy Taxi. And even after Sega left the console business, I still played a lot of their games on the GameCube, like Super Monkey Ball, Sonic Heroes, and Billy Hatcher. Nintendo was also a big part of my childhood, with their library of games like Mario, F-Zero, The Legend of Zelda, Wario, and especially Pokemon when it was in its prime. I still remember the day I took my Game Boy and my copy of Pokemon Yellow to school and played it during recess. The third were the British developer Rare, and were along with Nintendo, the developers that got me into gaming with the Donkey Kong Country trilogy on the Super Nintendo. Rare had a ton of games for the Nintendo 64, and looking back, I think Rare carried that system, with a lot of their titles being the first that pops into my head when the console is brought up in conversations. Me and my family used to play a lot of GoldenEye together, and Diddy Kong Racing was a fun multiplayer experience, being my favourite kart racer for that system, with the adventure mode that you can play with another person. I remember I used to draw a lot of the characters from that game as a kid, my favourite at the time being Conker, back when he was innocent. Oh, how that changed when he got his own game. One of the games that stuck out to me, and one of my favourites for the console, was Banjo-Kazooie, which is the subject for today's video. I had a lot of fun memories of playing Banjo as a kid, and it was fun to watch my brothers play it. However, it has been over a decade since I last played it, only watching a couple of Let's Plays. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was the main reason, along with Street Fighter 4, that I wanted an Xbox 360, because I loved the original so much as a kid. I was even excited seeing the dynamic duo in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate being one of my mains alongside Yoshi, Solid Snake, and Mega Man. Last year I got a copy of Rare Replay for the Xbox, which features a majority of their catalogue from Conker's Bad Fur Day, Battletoads, to the ZX Spectrum titles like Jetpack, and of course, the Banjo-Kazooie series, which is the version I played for this video. Seriously, this is one of the best compilations you would ever get to have, with how much games are included, fun tidbits for each title, and the overall presentation. The only games missing were the games that are owned by Nintendo, some licensed games they developed, as well as some of their Game Boy Advance titles. Did I enjoy this N64 cassette to this day? Let's find out. This is my nostalgic return to Banjo-Kazooie. Before we get into the game, I wanted to talk about how this old cassette came to be, as it originally wasn't intended to be a 3D platformer about a bear and a bird, but as a Super Nintendo game named Dream, Land of the Giants. A role-playing game inspired by JRPGs at the time, LucasArts adventure games, as well as pirate stories and fairy tales. The game starred a boy named Edison and a god named Dingo, who went on an adventure that encountered trolls, dinosaurs, and pirates. The game used the same set-on graphics technology as the Donkey Kong Country games, and was in development after Donkey Kong Country 2's release around 1995, as Rare wanted to experiment with a different style of game. It looked visually impressive for the Super Nintendo, and probably would have been a hidden gem years down the road. However, apparently the project became too ambitious for the console, and since the Nintendo 64 was on the rise, the team decided to transfer its development to the next system. The game dropped the more whimsical fairy tale parts and focused more on the pirate theme, as according to lead designer Greg Mayles, wanted a harder edge to it, that it wouldn't appeal to a wide enough audience if it was more lighthearted, and wouldn't want to be childish. The game, however, became too ambitious for the team at the time, so they went back to basics and tried a platformer similar to Donkey Kong Country. It's a shame that Dream didn't become a reality. No, Rare did went back to the world of pirates, as decades later they released Sea of Thieves for the Xbox. That seems to be doing well. Edison was replaced with Banjo, who apparently was a side character in Dream, but the team loved the character so much they wanted a game revolved around him. The more traditional platformer was quickly removed in favour of a 3D platformer Technophon after being impressed witnessing an early version of Super Mario 64 and 12 Tales Conquer 64. The latter being developed by another team at Rare. After a week of seeing these two projects, the team made a level and within another 16 months, the game became Banjo-Kazooie and released in stores in 1998. So what is Banjo-Kazooie, and what do you actually do in the game? While there were many drastic changes during development, the fairy tale element was still intact, as the game starts off with a witch named Gruntilda, inspired by the wicked witch from The Wizard of Oz, and the evil queen from Snow White, as she asks her magic cauldron about who is the prettiest girl in all the land, in which the cauldron replies, Tooty, Banjo's sister. Gruntilda becomes enraged with jealousy and immediately kidnaps her, no, not with Tooty putting up with some resistance, which causes a bit of a commotion outside Banjo's house. Kazooie hears the commotion and tries to wake up Banjo. No, this requires a lot of effort as Banjo sleeps at a yard. I wish I could sleep like him. After a bit more effort from Kazooie, the bear wakes up. No, not too late, and this is where Banjo's and Kazooie's adventure begins. Gruntilda intends to steal Tooty's beauty to make her the prettiest woman in the land, using her assistance machine. If the player gets the game over or decides to quit the game, you can see her plan succeed as she becomes beautiful for N64 standards, while Tooty becomes an ugly monster. The story itself is the usual damsel in distress story. However, it's not about the destination, but more so the journey, as this story's strength is in its characters, the comical writing, and the worlds you visit. The game itself feels like an interactive fairy tale, more so like Alice in Wonderland, as the player characters enter strange new worlds, encounter its outlandish inhabitants, and gain new transformations, similar to Alice's adventures in the book. Both the game and the Alice book are more about the moment rather than the big picture. These worlds don't connect to the big picture besides the themes you create, as well as a couple of characters like Bottles and Mumbo Jumbo, but offer memorable moments. The character Bottles has a couple of similarities to the Cheshire Cat, as both serve as the guide at the beginning to both the player and Alice, while annoying the titular characters in each story. The bird, the bear, and Alice have a lot in common. Now, I would say the use of Alice in Wonderland's narrative style can be seen more in Conker's Bad Fur Day, which I may cover in the future. The duo encounters a lot of strange faces, including a hippo named Captain Blubber, who lost his treasure, Wazza, a racist walrus, a ghost hand that plays a piano, and so many more. Some Donkey Kong fans may recognize the turtle in the Bubble Goop Swamp named Tip Top. He was a playable racer in Digicon Racing, as well as a beaver named Naughty, who was used as a common mook in the original Donkey Kong Country. One of my favourite parts is when you encounter a camel named Gobi, who first appears in the desert level, which is named after him, where you have to ground pound his back to spit some water out, which helps a tree grow, and then you see him in Church Woods to do the same method. He complains about being abused and flees to a Java world that is non-existent in the game. That gave me a chuckle. The main characters are also a fun bunch. Banjo is the yay-to-bat straightforward guy. He bounces well with the snarky Kazooie and the wacky characters they meet, kinda like Alice's encounters with the strange cast in the books. Kazooie is a sassy girl who insults everyone she meets, including Bottles, who she calls him things that a store kid would make up, like Dodo Boy. No, Bottles fights back and calls her names too. My favourite character is none other than Gruntilda the Witch, who has an overall presence, being the catchiest for the plot, but also taunts the player with her nasty rhymes. She would be a great Madverse City player. The writers must have had a fun time writing her and coming up with multiple rhymes. Not all of them rhyme, which is pretty lame, but there are a lot of great ones that gave me a good laugh. Her dialogue is mostly insulting the heroes, but there are times where she gets excited about getting a new body, like saying how she could eat all the burgers and chips she could eat, which would just cause her to be fat again. Her relationship with her employees doesn't sound good either, with one of the notable ones being Cheeto the Magic Book, who offers Banjo and Kazooie with some cheats, in which Gruntilda threatens him by burning him. The humour is very dry and British, and as someone who enjoys British comedies, I enjoy that style of writing. There is a ton of dialogue in the game. However, originally being on the Nintendo 64, having actual voices would have taken up a lot of storage space and would have probably had to increase the cartridge size. Now, it would have cost more, which wouldn't have been ideal. This was also before the expansion pack that was used for Donkey Kong 64, with Zora's Mask and Perfect Dark became a thing. The largest cartridge size for the system was 64 megabytes, which is the equivalent to 512 megabits. I'm not much of a technical whiz, but that is far less compared to the CDs at the time, which the PlayStation and Sega Saturn were using. The two largest games for the Nintendo 64 were Conker's Bad Fur Day and the surprising port of Resident Evil 2, and then there were sacrifices with Resident Evil 2, like the voices and FMVs being heavily compressed. Due to this issue, they decided that every character that has a line would all be in gibberish, which became a part of its identity used in the sequels. Each character has a different pitch, tone, and were played by some of the devs, such as Grant Kirkhope, Evian Novakovic, Chris Seaver, and Chris Sutherland, the actor voicing the iconic duo. A lot of people love it, and I can't imagine a Banjo-Kazooie game without it. You could say the limitations of a console sold off the team's creativity in the story department. I wouldn't want to hear long lines of gibberish in a JRPG or a story-driven game with loads of cutscenes, but it works for a 10+ hour platformer game that doesn't take its narrative seriously. The sound design is one of the most iconic parts of this game, and this is thanks to the main composer, Grant Kirkhope, a freelancer musician who has worked on many games at Rare during the 90s and has worked on many games such as Mario & Rabbids Kingdom Battle, A Hat in Time, Yooka-Laylee, and Kingdoms of Amalur. He was also brought back to do the Spiral Mountain remix for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I hear the music and I just become hit with nostalgia. Each score fits each area from the game, such as Spiral Mountain with the banjos playing, reflecting Banjo's home, Treasure Trove Cove mimicking steel drums and xylophones that really give off a summer holiday vibe, and my personal favourite track, Freeze Easy Pete, which feels like a perfect track to play at Christmas. It also uses diegetic music, as a lot of the songs have noises that mimic objects and animals that exist within these levels, such as the birds tweeting, the bees buzzing, and parrots squawking in Spiral Mountain, the frogs croaking in Bubble Droop Swamp, and the engines roaring in Rustic Bucket Bay. The music also changes depending on where the main characters are, such as when they are underwater, inside of a house, or when they encounter a character within the level. One of my favourite uses of diegetic sound is when they're on top of Treasure Trove Cove and the music stops playing in favour of hearing the wind blow and the seagulls squawking, showing how high the player is during the level. Banjo-Kazooie is a Diectaphon platformer inspired by the likes of Super Mario 64, as you get a bunch of MacGuffins, with the major ones being the notes that must be used to open the doors to the next area in the Witch's Year, and the Jiggys, which are equivalent to the Power Stars from Mario 64, in which there are 10 in each world, plus 10 more in Gruntilda's Year. It's a lot more tame compared to games like DK64, being the right amount of stuff to collect. There are a total of 9 worlds that are all connected to the main hub world, Gruntilda's Year, which are all varied and fun to explore, like Mumbo's Mountain, Treasure Trove Cove, and Mad Monster Mansion. Before entering the Witch's Year, there is also a tutorial world, Spiral Mountain, which offers the basic moves taught by Bottles. Here's a good tutorial area that teaches how to play the game well, with little fret. Now you can immediately skip them and go to Gruntilda's Year if you wish to do so, which is nice for repeated playthroughs. This game has a steady progression, with the first world, Mumbo's Mountain, being simple, with easy enough challenges and quick to navigate, while having a little amount of hazards to get in the player's way. Each world becomes slightly more complex from the one before, throwing new challenges, which ranges from just exploring, collecting 5 Jinjos, collecting miscellaneous items, to challenges offered by the characters in those worlds. The majority of them are fun, with one of my favourites being the race against a polar bear in Freeze Easy Pete, and climbing on top of a lighthouse in Treasure Trove Cove. The one with the crocodiles can kiss my arse now. Every time I try that one, it feels that I barely made it. Banjo starts out with the basic essentials like a jump, double jump, punch, ground pound, and roll. Fun fact, the double jump was the main reason why Kazooie even existed, as the developers wanted an authentic reason on why Banjo to double jump. Banjo's Fury of Punches is pretty much outclassed from the other offensive moves, like his roll, which covers more distance and is more efficient, as well as the jump attack called the Rat-a-tat-rap, which became my go-to method to kill enemies. Throughout the adventure, battles would teach the duo more moves that correlate with the world you are in, making sure the player doesn't get overwhelmed from the get-go, and spicing things up beyond the way. These come from the Talon Trot, which increases the duo's speed and allows them to run on slippery edges, and others require ammunition, like shooting eggs coming from Kazooie's mouth and, harass, as well as the ability to fly and become invincible, and I would say most of their abilities do at least get some usage, especially the edge-based moves. The Talon Trot became my go-to way to navigate, as it's a lot quicker than the default movement. There are Mumbo tokens you can get, and when you give them to Mumbo Jumbo, the salmon, he will transform our heroes into different creatures, like a termite, a crocodile, and a pumpkin. However, besides the crocodile, you are defenseless and are only used for maybe 1 or 2 Jiggies each, which is rather disappointing. I would like these to be expanded, and maybe they do in theory. The controls are comfortable, with Banjo and Kazooie having a decent weight to them, and the platforming for the most part is enjoyable to navigate. Swimming needs some time to get used to, as it's either too slow with the default speed or too fast with the breaststroke. The ability to fly is activated through these panels, and it is comfy to control. If you want to ascend, just press the jump button, which tosses you some red feathers, which are scattered across the worlds. Flying feels nice, which I'm surprised considering the generation it was originally on was the beginning of 3D gaming. I would have praised the flying controls a bit more if it wasn't for the dive bomber cat, which will automatically launch the duo in a straight line, which is easy to miss to target and can cause you to crash and use health. Unlike Mario 64, where the player is booted back to the hub world once they collected a Power Star, Banjo and Kazooie remain in the level they are on and are free to explore the rest of the level once they collected the Jiggy, which saves a lot of time. It was only until Super Mario Odyssey where Mario began to do this. If the player wants to leave the area, they should just go back to the panel at the starting point, and this isn't really an issue since the worlds are just big enough to explore without feeling lost. The only time I thought the level was too big was in Kitcot Woods. While having a great concept exploring the woods in different seasons, it sometimes became frustrating to explore as the level is mostly vertical and falling could result in wasting time to climb back up. You also have to visit the same area 4 times, as each season is its own area. Most of the levels are fun to explore, but I feel it falls slightly at the final 2 levels of the game, Rusty Bucket Bay and Kitcot Woods. I already mentioned my issues with the latter, but Rusted Butter Bay is my least favourite, as most of the level is covered in poisonous water that drains Banjo's air meter, even on the surface of the water. And if you are playing the original N64 version or the Switch Online version, then this level can be a pain, as in the N64 version, the notes you collect will reset back to 0 if you die once, which is easy to do in this world, especially in the area with the bottomless pits. There are a total of 100 notes in each world, so imagine having like 90 notes only to die due to a bottomless pit and have to restart your progress again. At least the Jiggies you collected don't reset in either version. Thankfully, I was playing the Xbox version, which keeps the number of notes you have collected thus far easy, being the best version to play. I can even cut corners in this version by using a life and respawn at the beginning. If you are good enough and have collected a majority of notes and Jiggies in the previous worlds, you can skip either Rusted Butter Bay or Kitcot Woods and go straight to the finale. I would say that you probably would have to collect about 80% of the notes to get to the final boss, but Banjo-Kazooie allows the player to pick and choose which Jiggies to collect. So if you find a challenge that is too difficult, you can either come back to it and try a different challenge, or go to a new world entirely. I wouldn't say Rusted Butter Bay and Kitcot Woods are the worst parts of the game. I will be mentioning some endgame spoilers, so if you want to skip to it, then go to this part of the video. Okay, so my least favourite part of the game is near the end where you participate in a board game. The duo can only move one space per challenge, and depending on the space you land on, will depend on the challenge you face. A majority of these challenges are trivia questions that challenge your visual and audio memory of your playthrough. There are also challenges based on pre-existing challenges, like the Return and Crocodile minigame from Bubble Deep Swan, which you know how I feel about that one. Having these trivia questions and pre-existing challenges aren't the reasons why I don't like this part though. This comes down to the Gruntilda spaces, which give you personal questions about a villain, which gave me the most trouble. You were supposed to get these answers throughout multiple areas of the hub world from Gruntilda's sister, Brentilda, another character inspired by one of the characters from The Wizard of Oz, who gossips about her ugly sister. However, you can easily miss Brentilda and only gives you one fact about her sister per location. This might just be a me thing, but I tend to develop these types of dialogue, especially for a game that averages about around 10 hours. And it would have been nice to have these facts written down in like the pause menu once you spoke to her, in case you do forget. If you get these answers right, then you can move to another space. However, if you get these questions wrong, you use 1 health, which I mostly did every time I got a Gruntilda question. I had to guess most of the time. Like, how am I supposed to know about her high school nickname without Brentilda's help? There are also spaces that if you land on, you instantly die, and if you do die, then you have to restart the entire board game again, which is way too long. The questions are randomized too, to make it more annoying. This is the only time I got a game over. Once you get past the Inferno board game, Gruntilda flees to the top of the castle, Banjo-Kazooie saves Tutti, and everyone is happy, celebrating with a few drinks, and the credits roll. Well... until Tutti stalls the duo and tells them to finish the job. Banjo and Kazooie head back to the Witch's Lair to put her out of her misery in one last battle. This is technically the only boss fight in the game. There have been large enemies you had to fight, like the giant hermit crab in Treasure Trove Cove, but they added more like mini bosses that go down in a couple of hits with simple patterns. Plus they were rare and far between. Gruntilda feels like a proper boss fight, as she has multiple phases that make you use a lot of your abilities. The first 2 phases are simple, as you need to dodge her attacks. The third phase was the hardest part for me, as you have to fight her in the air using Kazooie's flight ability and the dive bomb attack, which I mentioned earlier can be hard, especially now since there are bottomless pits, which you can easily fall into during this phase. The fourth phase consists of freeing the Jinzos, using your edge while avoiding Gruntilda's fireballs and explosive homing shots. This part tests your use of the invincibility wings. Once you free the Jinzos, you need to activate the legendary Jinzonator, again using your edge. Once the Jinzonator is freed, the other Jinzos will tackle Gruntilda, which causes her to fall all the way to the ground, causing her demise. The credits properly roll and the heroes celebrate on the beach with a few drinks, with hints teasing the next game, and the stop and swap feature that unfortunately was not used. To keep it simple, the stop and swap feature was a thing that would have added new features to a bunch of rare games by switching cartridges, but since the newer models of the N64 would have been damaged by switching cartridges, the stop and swap feature was unfortunately not used. I put in a link in the description that goes about it in more detail. The Xbox version instead advertises nuts and bolts along with stop and swap that now gives you new parts for your vehicle in nuts and bolts. This game still has a lot of cool features like the cheat codes you can use in Treasure Trove Cove. I remember loving this game when I was a kid, and I know sometimes when you go back to a game you played when you were a child, you may not enjoy it as much now, or not enjoy it at all. Thankfully, this was not the case, as I still loved the game as an adult, despite a few small bumps at the end. I remember turning it on for the first time in years and just got slapped with nostalgia, making me feel like a kid again, back to simpler times. If you love 3D platformers and haven't played Banjo-Kazooie, I highly recommend you do so. Aside from the Nintendo 64, you can play it on the Nintendo Switch N64 expansion, but the best way to play it is the Xbox version, which can be played from the 360, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, or even on PC with Microsoft's cloud gaming service. It's also available on Rare Replay, which is an easy find secondhand too. The Xbox versions removed the notes problems like I mentioned earlier in the video, as well as getting better in most cases and a better frame rate. I have played Nuts and Bolts and Pirate, but I've never played the sequel, so I may play that at some point. Banjo-Kazooie was a blast from the past, and will be a game that I will be coming back to in the future. Talking about childhood games has made me feel nostalgic, so I would like to know what childhood games that you haven't played in years would you love to go back to. A game I would love to go back to would be a Super Nintendo game I played called Cybernator, which I never completed as a kid. It recently had a re-release for the Switch that was renamed Assault Suits Vulcan that I may get. Let me know what games you would love to play again in the comments below, and I hope you have a wonderful day.